Hey, Cypher here. I've noticed over time that I'll get comments saying something along the lines that I want to quote Wikipedia, but it's Wikipedia so I can't use it, or something along those lines. And in general, there seems to be a great disdain of Wikipedia. I even saw a recent video from a channel I kinda like that postulated that journalism is greatly decreased because of the existence of Wikipedia. But I think a lot of this stuff gets way blown out of proportion. You see, Wikipedia is actually really important and has advanced our ability to do scholarship to entirely new levels. And I think a lot of the complaints stem from a misunderstanding of what Wikipedia actually is and what its function should be. Because it is an encyclopedia, like these things right here, not a primary or secondary source. It is tertiary. So let's get into how we can actually use Wikipedia as scholars, legitimately. So the main problem that people have with Wikipedia stems from its easily editable state. Basically, anybody can click that little edit thing and then put in new stuff. Sometimes they can hide it behind sources in that and make it seem like some new myth is true. Sabotage is an ever-present problem. But there are mitigating circumstances. First of all, you, the reader, as with any other source, including my own videos, can always go and check the sources. Think for yourself. Luckily, Wikipedia actually hyperlinks its footnotes, so it is incredibly easy to check its source material. Then there is also a moderating community. This moderation can take many forms, from just discussions that happen in the forums, to things like you've seen the citation needed. They can put in brackets specific things that might be considered wrong, or even list at the top of the article a thing saying, there are problematic things in this article, or whatever. There's an entire community oriented around keeping Wikipedia free of sabotage. Then there's another level to that, which is administrative restrictions. Some pages will not let you edit them. You have to be a certain level of administrator in order to edit them or to approve edits. There's a whole framework in which different levels of administration are required for editing. And finally, there are reviewers, who often get hired based on their existence in some of these right here, In fact, this encyclopedia specifically, the Oxford Companion to United States History, has been used by Wikipedia specifically to hire reviewers. As in, people who wrote pieces in this end up being reviewers for Wikipedia. Now, I don't know the specifics of the reviewing gig, but I have seen articles listed as being reviewed by people who wrote the corresponding article in this. Interestingly enough, I'd actually prefer the Wikipedia article over what is in this. Not only because it is reviewed by the person who wrote it, but also because there are no footnotes whatsoever. A lot of academic encyclopedias do not contain footnotes. In fact, I'd dare say most. Encyclopedia of Britannica only recently started doing that, and they're still far behind Wikipedia. As in comparison to other encyclopedias, Wikipedia is better. The only difference is it's publicly editable, and that's what people have a problem with. But you can always go and check those sources, along with all the other things that they do to prevent sabotage. Now, academic encyclopedias serve their purpose as well. For instance, you're getting the exact viewpoint of that particular scholar, as opposed to the congealed mess of 1,000 different editors. And Wikipedia is still prone to sabotage. On my social media, whenever I see something that is posted and it's just hilarious, because there is plenty of sabotage, I'll post it up. Most of the time they're funny. And I think that Canadian one is still there. But Wikipedia is indeed good for something in scholarship. For instance, it's particularly good at defining what is called common knowledge. The basic writing guide for the entire historical profession is called the Chicago Manual of Style. You can find simplified versions of it like this, which is from another standard called Tertiary, but they now are doing it on the Chicago Manual of Style. And specifically, there is this thing called common knowledge. It is generally understood that if it is common knowledge, one does not need to prove the existence of what is common knowledge. For instance, you don't need to put any kind of citation to prove that George Washington was the first president of the United States. That's just common knowledge. And Wikipedia is particularly good at defining what common knowledge is. So what you can get from like the sidebar on a Wikipedia article, unless it's statistical in nature, is essentially common knowledge. And for academic work, there is absolutely no need to cite this. But for YouTube, there is. A lot of the time people will not know about the things that you're talking about and they want to dig deeper. So I will sometimes include Wikipedia links in the description as part of the sourcing. Now, what I use Wikipedia for is common knowledge things, obviously, but I have seen many people misinterpret that. I always put the Wikipedia stuff at the very bottom of my citations, because then there's all the academic stuff, but somehow they just go straight to the Wikipedia thing and think that that's the only sourcing. I mean, you have to be incredibly ignorant to think that I'm only using Wikipedia when specifically right above it is a bunch of scholarly sources. But of course, it's the internet. People will be as ignorant as possible because, well, they're stupid. But here's the thing, if you're writing for an actual scholarly journal, you can't use Wikipedia. It is not a secondary source. It is a tertiary source. Just as you can't use any encyclopedia whatsoever as a secondary source, you may not use Wikipedia. The nice thing about Wikipedia, on the other hand, is that it cites secondary sources. So you can do what I call source mining, as in going to Wikipedia and using their sources for what you want to find out. Most of these encyclopedias can't do that. Luckily, most historians include historiographies, but that's a wholly different subject that I've already done long before. But the basic reason why I put Wikipedia in the descriptions is for easy access so that viewers can go and do some research themselves. And that's the point. Wikipedia is a starting place, not the end of research. It's a great way to quickly go and find out if you're doing something correctly, or when something happened if you have it a little bit hazy in your brain. It's especially good at making lists. Since everything's hyperlinked, you can check over and over and over again to make sure that they are indeed referencing something legitimate. But you will have seen in a few episodes that I have actually used Wikipedia's lists in video form in order to say, like, you know, here's a list of Indian massacres or something along those lines. It's very good at listing things like that, whereas these things won't have it. And normally you will have to find a specific book with a really good appendix. Since I do a lot on American violence, you'll find that books like this, Lynching in the West, have excellent appendices that list a whole bunch of lynchings, right? Except for, here's the thing, sometimes Wikipedia is actually a lot better than these books. So, you have to take it comparatively. And ultimately, if you're going to make a list for a scholastic source, you kind of have to make it yourself. I also use Wikipedia for its media. For instance, this page right here, which is called a timeline of flags, is really useful for when I'm talking about historical situations and I'm showing a flag to represent a country or something along those lines. That way, I can get the right flag for the right time frame. And best of all, everything's under Wiki Commons license. So as long as I'm using it for educational purposes, which of course this entire channel is, then I don't need to request permission to use it. In fact, Wiki Commons has another really useful thing that I use all the time, which is primary sources. Wiki Commons actually has a large list of primary sources, which you can just search using the Ctrl+F function. It is so much easier finding a quote when you can just quote it off of something that you just press Control F and find the quote, as opposed to having to read a book all the way just trying to find some particular quote. But of course, Wikipedia does have its drawbacks, and there are reasons why I don't use it in other settings. For instance, I do not use it in academic work. Now, there is a difference between academia and scholarship. Scholarship is just the engagement of trying to learn new things and, actually advance our knowledge, whereas academia is the school. In fact, the history profession is actually a lot larger outside of academia than within. But for school papers, things in academic journals and whatnot, I will not use Wikipedia. Save for one specific instance, I have actually used Wikipedia specifically for a quote. But what I was doing there was using Wikipedia to illustrate a common myth. As in, I was quoting Wikipedia as being wrong, which they have no problem with that. Plus, it is a tertiary source. Ultimately, it serves a function of gathering information, but it is not particularly good at giving an interpretation for that information gathered. History is not merely saying the facts as they are. One must provide an interpretation. That's part of telling a story. But Wikipedia is not a legitimate source of getting that interpretation. Now, if you're trying to provide your own interpretation of something, it's perfectly good of giving you common knowledge and a general starting point for source mining. That's what it's good for. What it's not good for is telling you the basic interpretation. Hence why I always put Wikipedia at the bottom of the list of sources, because all those other ones are helping me to provide interpretation. I bring in my own interpretation, but it's always a mix. That's how scholarship goes. You're standing on the shoulders of giants. And that's where these specialty encyclopedias do beat Wikipedia, because they do provide interpretation. Ultimately, you should go to the author of those articles in order to provide the interpretation. But since it's single author form, then you can pretty much guarantee it is a single interpretation. They also are far less likely to be subject to sabotage, since they can't be edited on the fly. Now, to say that they are devoid of sabotage would be to think that somehow historians are omniscient and never get anything wrong or try to put out their own agendas, which is foolish, definitely. Although it seems like some commenters seem to think that that is your job as a historian, to be completely objective and never have any bias, and say the history as it was. But the whole point of scholarship is to engage those interpretations to try to get at what history was. We don't know. We're putting out what we think it was. And if that means that we're incorrect, that means another scholar gets to come in and challenge our arguments. Scholarship is all about argumentation. So ultimately, should you derive your arguments from Wikipedia? No. As I said, it is a good starting point. It does kind of define what common knowledge is, and it is excellent for source mining, as well as what Wikimedia and Wikicommons gives us for video editing and that. Plus, the fact is, it just contains more information than any of these can at all. The amount of pages it would take to fill up what is written on Wikipedia would be more than what this bookshelf holds. The fact is, I can go from researching what happened in Bodie, California in the 1880s to what the current theoretical structure of string theory is, with just a few clicks. And so Wikipedia is way better of an encyclopedia than most, and Encyclopedia Britannica can't hold a candle to it, and that's why you won't see Encyclopedia Britannica up here, because Wikipedia has pretty much supplanted its usefulness. So if you've been one of those commenters who were hesitant to link to Wikipedia or anything along those lines, don't be. it is a great source for starting your research. Just don't end there.